Good morning to everybody. Thank you very much for attending this webinar. I would like also to thank you very much, the Inter-American Teacher Education Network, the coordinator, Adriana Vilela, and also the team of specialists like Mónica de la Garza, Micaela Rey, James Parr. Thank you very much for this opportunity. For us, it's a pleasure to collaborate with them and bring to you this type of webinars today on a topic that it's really important for citizenship education. We have today our webinar participants. I was told that we have 240 people registered from 11 countries, so we are really very happy with this. Participants that will be joining are from Argentina, Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, Guatemala, Mexico, Peru, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, Suriname, and Trinidad and Tobago. So really thank you very much for being there. I would hope that this is the first one of more webinars on this very interesting topic. Well, I'm going to tell you about our presenter, Professor Dr. Steve Miller. For us, as Mónica de la Garza said, it is an honor to have him here, and I can tell you that being his student was also an honor and a privilege in every student life. So I would like to thank Dr. Steve Miller, because from the very beginning of these conversations for making this webinar, he always says, yes, has a great disposition, and a person with his experience, with his prestige was so simple. So I really would like to thank you and highlight his permanent attitude of collaboration and sharing his tremendous and wonderful knowledge and experience. So Dr. Stephen Miller is Emeritus Associate Professor in the Department of Teaching and Learning at The Ohio State University. He graduated from Bowling Green State University with a Bachelor of Liberal Studies, double major in Economics and Political Science, and I don't know really how to say this, Monica, BA in Social Studies Education. After teaching high school economics and government, he earned his master and PhD degrees in Social Studies Education, Economics and Research Design at OSU, where he started the Center for Economic Education in 1978 and served as its director until 1993. Dr. Miller began teaching in international civic and economic education programs with Education for Democratic Citizenship in Poland program, 1990 to 1995, and continued with projects in Lithuania and Bulgaria from 1993 to 1995. He was one of the American faculty in the Council on Economic Education's premier Training of Trainers program from 1996 to its conclusion in 2011, and served for 7 years as its chief pedagogue. In all, Miller has taught or conducted 63 programs in 21 countries. His last publication is Focus Understanding Economics in Civics and Government, Council for Economic Education 2009. He was the co-author with William Bosher, Mark Schuck, and Philip Van Volten. He retired after 31 years at OSU in March 2009. With really great pleasure, I will invite Dr. Miller to make his presentation, and I would like to thank him once again.
Well, thank you, Romina, and welcome to all of our participants. I think I want to take this opportunity to thank OAS and the Inter-American Teacher Education Network for inviting me to do this. It's a great pleasure to be with you. I also think I should spend special congratulations to the Latinos and Latinas in today's audience on the election of a pope from that part of the country. And I want to say a special hello to the Training of Trainers alumni who might be with us today. The title of my presentation is Strengthening Students' Decision Making with Economics and Civics. And it's an especially important topic for all of you who are concerned with democratization and maintaining or improving democracy in your countries. Our concern broadly today is education for citizenship, and just doing a little housekeeping here on definitions. Some authorities distinguish between citizenship education and civic education. I'm not going to do that today. We have more important work, so I'm going to use these terms interchangeably with the understanding that when I use one, I'm encompassing elements of both of them. There are some fairly technical distinctions between the two. And so we're really concerned with perhaps what Alexis de Tocqueville said in his famous book, Democracy in America from 1835. The health of a democratic society may be measured by the quality of the functions performed by private citizens. We look to the quality of what it is that private citizens do. So we might say that we are trying to increase the ability of students to execute these functions of private citizens, and as educators, that is an important part of what we are about. And so we're asking ourselves the question, how might we do that? Today I'm going to give you some ideas about some content that might be helpful in helping train students to be better executors of the functions of private citizens in a democracy. And also I'm going to give you some ideas about teaching strategies. So let's begin. Let's lay out some groundwork here about why I have selected what I am selecting to talk about. One conception of the essential elements of civic education was written by my friend John Patrick from Indiana University in an article he entitled Civic Education for Constitutional Democracy, an International Perspective. And he indicated that there were three essential elements in civic education. One of these is essential civic knowledge, and by that he meant things like learning about individual rights, the Constitution and country, popular sovereignty, important concepts like that. Another aspect of this is essential civic skills, which I'm going to come back to in a moment. Then he said that there were essential civic virtues, and you might think of these things as self-discipline, civility, compassion, so on. We are going to focus on essential civic skills. And John Patrick said about essential civic skills that a central facet of civic education for constitutional democracy is the development of intellectual skills and participatory skills which enable citizens to think and act in behalf of their individual rights and their common good. Intellectual skills empower citizens to identify, describe, and explain information, ideas pertinent to public issues, and to make and defend decisions on these issues. Participatory skills empower citizens to influence public policy decisions and hold accountable the representatives in government. Now you'll notice that I have highlighted think and make and defend decisions. So we are going to spend our time of all of the range of things we might be doing in citizenship education. We're going to focus on helping students learn to think and to make and defend decisions. And we think that there are some things from economics that are going to be especially helpful for us in doing that. And I'm going to really spend our time talking about four actually useful concepts drawn from economics. The first of these is the idea of scarcity, which is absolutely fundamental. Its close cousin is the notion of opportunity cost, which some people believe is if you have to teach students one thing in economics, it ought to be about opportunity cost. We're going to learn about economic goals because those are extremely important when we're dealing with public policy issues. And we're going to talk about trade-offs. And we're especially going to talk about those in relationship to economic goals. So first, let's do a small exercise together. It's one of my favorites, and it's the way I start a lot of my courses or workshops on economics and how to teach it. I'd like all of you out there to grab a scrap paper. I'm going to give you 60 seconds. I'll tell you when to start. Don't start yet. Grab some scrap paper, and in 60 seconds, I want you to list everything you can think of that, first, you'd like to have, second, that you do not currently have, and third, that you can buy with money. So they have to be things that you don't have, that you'd like to have, that you can buy with money. And please, please, when you do this, be specific. So by specific, I mean don't just write a house. What kind of a house would you like? Maybe a small home in the country, or maybe a small beachside cottage, or why not both? So please be specific. I'm going to give you 60 seconds when I start. Write down as many things as you can think of. Begin now. And you've got about 25 seconds left. Okay, why don't you stop now and put your pencils down. I hope you came up with a long list. When I do this with students or in educational workshops, I usually solicit some answers. And as people give answers, other people in the group say, oh, gee whiz, I wish I had thought of that. And so I let them add those items to their lists. And usually, by the time we do this for a few minutes, we discover that you can come up with a pretty long list of things that you'd like to have that you don't have that you can buy with money. Now, the point of all of this is to ask the students then the big question, which is, why don't we all have all of the things that we would like to have? So these two alls are in red. Why don't we all have all the stuff that we'd all like to have? Normally, when you put this question to students, most students will say, we don't have enough money. And that is what it looks like from the individual's point of view. But the point of view from society as a whole is much different, because after all, if all we needed was more money for everybody to have all the things that we all want, that's an easy problem to solve. We just give everybody lots and lots and lots of money. And when you talk with students about that, normally they come to the recognition that from society's point of view, it isn't the lack of money, it's the scarcity of productive resources. And in economics, we know that wants are limited and productive resources are scarce relative to those wants. And so this is the basic notion of scarcity and occasions the decision for us to begin to make some choices. Let me put in here an aside that by productive resources we mean what we typically call land, all things on the land and under the land, like coal or oil or aluminum, bauxite, labor. We need capital, which includes the goods, the tools with which we make things, and we also include entrepreneurship. Those are the things that we think are scarce. So scarcity is our first concept. It's a condition that exists because human wants exceed the capacity of available resources to satisfy those wants. Also, it's a situation in which a resource has more than one valuable use. And when you put it to use in one way, that means that you can't use it in another way. And we're going to come to that in just a second. The problem of scarcity faces all individuals and organizations, including firms and government agencies. So scarcity is with us always. And part of our citizenship education is going to be helping students think their way through these social issues that arise because of scarcity. And one of the very first tools that we have to recognize when we're doing this is the notion of opportunity cost. This is one of these wonderful terms in economics that makes sense when you think about it. What is the cost of using a resource in a particular way? Well, it's the opportunity to use that resource in a different way. So that is the common sense notion behind the term opportunity cost. Technically, we call it the foregone benefit of the next available, next best alternative that must be given up when scarce resources are used for one purpose instead of another. Now, notice it's only one alternative. It's the next best alternative. It's not the sum of all the foregone opportunities. In economics, sometimes we refer to this as the real cost. So let's consider time. Time is a resource. It certainly is scarce. It certainly means there's an opportunity cost. If we use our time in one way, we can't use it in another way. So let's consider from the student's point of view, one way the student might be able to use time is to do his homework. Of course, an alternative to that would be not to do that big stack of homework, but to take a nap instead, which, given that stack of homework, somebody might do even without thinking about it. And the third possibility is to go have some fun. Let's say, in this case, we're talking about going to a baseball game. Now, from our point of view of opportunity cost, whichever one the student selects, the cost is whichever of the other two the student gave up in order to do their first choice. So if they choose sleeping and their next best choice was going to the baseball game, then the opportunity cost of sleeping is going to the baseball game, but it's not both of the other two alternatives. So scarcity and opportunity cost mean that we have to choose. And in choosing, we are forced to make decisions. This is fundamental, and it's unavoidable. So let me introduce you to an old friend to some of you from the Training of Trainers program, but still one of my favorite things to use with students, which is called the PACE decision-making model. And it has these components. The P comes from defining the problem. As I've always said, this is an important part of this. List the alternatives. That's the A part. Those are the different ways in which you might achieve the goal or to solve the problem. State the criteria. These are the things with which you're going to decide which alternative is best. You have to evaluate each of the alternatives in terms of the criteria that you've chosen, and then based on that, you wind up making your decision or making your choice. So we often use this little decision-making grid, which you see has a spot to list the alternatives down one side. It has a spot to list the criteria across the top, and in each of these little boxes here, we are going to place the our evaluation of that alternative in terms of the criteria. So if we go back to our particular problem with time, we had these three alternatives. We had do your homework, we had sleep, and we had go to the baseball game. Some criteria that might be used, these are not the only criteria, but they're ones that I selected to use for our example. You want to get good grades, you'd like to get refreshed, and you'd like to have some fun. Those are three different criteria, and notice that the alternatives don't all meet each of these criteria, and they don't meet them all equally well. So the next step is for us to evaluate each of these alternatives in terms of the criteria. I did this evaluation of these. You might evaluate it differently, which is a point we'll come back to in a few minutes. But doing your alternative, I put 2 pluses because that's going to really help you get good grades. Unfortunately, you might be very tired, and so I gave it 2 minus signs. It's not much fun. Some of the homework might be fun, but maybe not all of it. And having fun with friends, well, that's only going to happen if you wind up doing some of your homework with your friends, so I gave it a 0. Sleep won't help you get good grades, but you will wake up refreshed. Sleeping might be some fun, but it doesn't help you at all to do anything with your friends. If you go to the baseball game, you really won't do anything to help your grades. You'll be somewhat refreshed, but you're not going to be getting any sleep. It'll be a lot of fun, and you're going to have a lot of fun with your friends. So this is evaluating each of the criteria each of the alternatives in terms of the criteria. And based on this, you might think you'd make the decision of going to a baseball game. It has more pluses and fewer minuses than all of the alternatives. So you might decide to do that, although in a minute we're going to see why you might not decide to do that, even though it has apparently more pluses and fewer minuses. Now, some of the advantages of this PACE program is you're forced to define the problem. If you don't know where you're going to wind up someplace else. So problem definition is extremely important. You're forced to think about the possibilities. What are your options really? You're forced to state what is important. What is it that I value? You're forced to use your knowledge in order to analyze these alternatives in terms of the criteria. And you're forced to think and decide what is the best choice. So this is a very systematic way to help students learn to be good decision makers as citizens. There are some overlooked benefits of PACE that you often don't hear about, and I want to spend just a minute with you on them. One of the things that I really like about the PACE model is it helps us understand what are we disagreeing about. We know we're disagreeing, maybe we're even talking past each other, but why? Maybe it's because our definition of the problem is not the same. You're trying to solve one problem, and I'm trying to solve another. Maybe it's that we differ in the results on the predicted outcomes. So if we go back to the little example I used, and I said that I didn't think that going to the baseball game would refresh you very much, somebody else might say, oh no, I would be very refreshed by going to the baseball game. So they would evaluate that predicted outcome of that alternative differently than I would in terms of that criterion. How do we value the criteria? This is a very important one, and I can't emphasize this too strongly. Even though we can count up pluses and minuses, as we did in the little example we had, it looks like we might arrive at the alternative of going to the baseball game. Fact is that if I value homework, getting good grades, more than the other two, a lot more than the other two, I would wind up choosing doing my homework because that value is far more important than that. The value behind that is that criterion, far more important than in the other ones. So how we value criteria is really important in helping us understand why we disagree. This PACE decision model and these aspects of disagreeing about things are applied to problems in many, many situations. In personal choices, in decisions made by social organizations, and in national and international issues. And there's a whole bunch of these kinds of social decision making that you can think of. I'm just going to point out a few of these. The United States is debating right now how to use money, so-called sequestering of our budget here. And so should we be devoting more money to the poor, to the military? There was just a report yesterday on the news about an Indonesian man who was trying to sell his kidney because he could not afford to buy medicine for his father. So should we allow people to do that? One of the international anti-whaling organizations was just in the news, trying to interrupt the actions of some whaling vessels. The U.S. is having a big debate about guns and gun ownership. And so there are lots of examples of social decision making, and you can take these right straight from the headlines. How do we use economic goals as criteria to evaluate these kinds of public policy sorts of decisions? Well, there are 6 of these economic goals. I'm not going to spend a lot of time with these because we don't have them, don't have a lot of time at this point to do it. One of the lessons, which I will share with you in a little while as a resource, has all of these, so you're going to be able to come back and get these. These are not the only important criteria, but they are 6 criteria drawn from economics that are really, really helpful in deciding about public policy decisions or social issues. Economic efficiency refers to how well do we use our resources. Do we use the resources to get those things produced that people say they'd like to have produced without a lot of waste? Economic equity refers to what's fair, and that fairness can refer either to equality of opportunity or equality of outcomes. This is one that's far more difficult for some people to get their arms around. Economic freedom means the freedom to use my stuff, my resources, my talents, my abilities, to be able to make the choices that I want to make without somebody telling me I can't do that. Economic growth is growing the size of the output of the nation. The only way for everybody to have the opportunity to have a bigger piece of the national output is if the national output grows. Economic security means not being subject to the kinds of events that can really, really create problems for people in their lives economically. Serious illness bankrupts the family. People get thrown out of work. Businesses fail. Those are all instances where people can become insecure economically. And economic stability refers to trying to maintain stable prices and at the same time try to keep the resources in the economy, including labor, fully employed. Those are the economic goals that typically we use in our decision-making process when we're looking at public policy kinds of decisions. So I want to point to 2 activities that you can use with students to practice these goals, and both of these are drawn from a lesson that Romina, whom you met a minute ago, and her colleague Guida Donaire wrote for Strengthening the Values in Democracy, which is a program of the Conciencia Association in Argentina. And I think you'll like both of these activities. And so one of these is to take a look at political posters and see what the candidates in these political posters are promising in terms of economic goals. I believe all these posters are from Argentina, I think. I don't read Spanish, but I do recognize the word trabajo. I'm not sure I pronounced that right, but I think that means work or jobs. And these politicians are all promising to help people, not all of them, but many of them are promising greater employment and greater job security. So you can analyze these posters in terms of those economic goals. That's to help make sure that after you've gone through the economic goals with students, they understand what the goals mean. And so this is practice for the students understanding those goals. There's another one that we can do with practice for students, and it's an activity that's also in a lesson 2 from Romina and Guido, and it's to take a look at these student intern diaries. And this contrasts the points of view of 2 congresspersons, Congresswoman Aqueous, and further down, the other student is being an intern for Congressman Libre. And find that quickly here. My mouse doesn't seem to work on this. So Congressman Libre has a different student in the student diaries. And what you find when the students read through these diaries is they discover that these two congresspersons don't value the same things. And so they have serious disagreements with each other about which things ought to be brought forward from the legislature for vote for the consideration of the legislature and for public policy. So one of these congresspersons places a greater value on stability, security, and equity, and the other one places a greater value on freedom, efficiency, and growth. And you can see that the result of that is that, in fact, these congresspeople are both making what we call trade-offs. They're willing to give up some of one benefit or advantage in order to gain another, which they regard as more important or more favorable. So when we talk about trade-offs among goals, which we do in economic analysis, we're talking about calculating the costs of the advantages or benefits of a policy in terms of one goal, and the costs often in terms of giving up some of another goal. So to come back to our examples in the diaries, when you have a chance to look at that more carefully, here's an example of it. Ms. Aqueous, this is quoting from the diaries, strongly supports a bill that will limit how many workers may be laid off in any given year and will require at least 6 months' notice to employees of any downsizing decisions. Well, as you might expect, Congressman Libre doesn't think much of that idea. He argues that firms must be allowed to make business decisions that are in the best interests of the company, including how many workers to employ. And so what we see when we're looking at the choices these two congresspersons are making, we see that Ms. Aqueous is willing to give up some freedom and efficiency in order to attain some security and equity. On the other hand, Mr. Libre wants to give up some equity and security in order to obtain some freedom and efficiency. So many, many times when we're reading about these disputes in the newspaper and who's arguing in favor of what, who wants what, and who doesn't want another thing, we're really talking about these disagreements about which goal is more important and how much of one goal we're going to give up in order to obtain some of another. So a few points about making these trade-offs. Trade-offs involve giving up some of one or more desirable things in order to obtain some of one or more of the other desirable things. These are typically not all or nothing choices. Notice that the goals that we've had here could be used as criteria in the PACE decision model. So we could go back through and look at the proposals from Ms. Aqueous and Mr. Libre and look at those proposed policy in terms of the economic goals and use the entire PACE decision-making model to evaluate each of the alternatives in terms of the 6 economic goals. So the PACE model might show us what this disagreement is about between these two. We might find out that there's a difference in how they're evaluating policy. One person might think that policy is going to be terrible for this particular economic goal. The other person doesn't think it's going to be that bad. That's why it's important for us to use something like the PACE model, because it helps us show that that's where the disagreement might be. And it requires us to use knowledge to think. You can't tell what the result of these policies is going to be without some knowledge, without, in this case, some economic knowledge to help us understand what the likely outcome of these policies in terms of goals are going to be. And so that brings us back to the essential civic skills that John Patrick talked about in our very first slide. He talked about the need to think and to make and defend decisions. And so when we use our useful concepts of scarcity, opportunity cost, economic goals, and trade-offs, and the skills from the PACE decision-making model. We are really, really assisting students in doing what it is that we think they need to do to be productive citizens, to be the kind of citizens that the Tocqueville wrote about early on, and to increase their ability to in their private functions as citizens of our democratic countries. I want to briefly share with you some great resources for lessons. I'm not really sure whether Romina or Monica can make this available in some other way to everybody. Perhaps they can contact them about that. But the two lessons I referenced from Romina and Guido are linked at these two spots. The Council on Economic Education in New York is a fantastic resource for economics lessons, and especially useful is a part of what they do, which is called Econ Ed Link, which has a lot of really, really nice online kinds of lessons that people can use. I would commend these to you, and I see that I neglected to mention my friends over at the Center for Civic Education. So if you Google that, Center for Civic Education, you'll find lots of really good resources for the classroom and for educators from them as well. And you'll find more than you need, I think, for those. So I want to thank you all, and I think now we're supposed to have the question and answer period. And I'm not sure what I do here with the screen. If I go back here, or maybe I'll leave this up in case I have to go back to one of the slides. So I'm going to turn it back over to Romina, and I'm going to stop speaking here for a moment.
Thank you very much, Dr. Miller. Yes, Romina Kasman is here with us. I think you can leave your camera open the whole time as you're going to be answering some questions, unless Romina, I think Romina would like to say some words. So yeah, no, let me then pass the camera to her first, and then we're going to provide it back to you. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Miller, very much for this valuable presentation. Very interesting. I think for most of us, it's wonderful to listen to you again, because we are never tired to learn about how economic education can strengthen citizenship competencies. It's really for us who work in this field, economic education is really a contribution, I think, not only for strengthening citizenship competencies, but also to practice them. So economic education is a way to make citizenship competencies make true. So I think it's so. Thank you very much for this presentation. And while the participants are making their questions, I would like to ask you a question, because I know there are some challenges, for many participants, maybe it's the first time or one of the first times that they listen about it. And I would like to know, which are the challenges, the most common challenges that you find when teaching economic education? Because teaching economic education just not to be a theoretical knowledge, but to be a practical knowledge that help our students to become better informed and equipped decision makers. So I would like to hear about your great experience as a pedagogue, and how we can make the teaching of economic education a field and a way of making our students more committed and more active in their participation at schools and in their daily life in their community.
Well, Romina, thank you for that question, and it certainly is an important one. Here's what I'd say, and it's what I've taught for many years in seminars and programs in our graduate courses at Ohio State. the point is not the knowledge, the point is the use of the knowledge. I don't really, it's not important, as important for me whether a kid can draw up a supply and demand curve as whether he can use the knowledge of supply and demand for some useful purpose. And so the challenge for all teachers, I think, is to keep in mind what we're trying to get students to do. And we're trying to get students to think and to use knowledge to think. And so I don't want to see teachers stop once they've given students or taught some lessons where they convey basic economic knowledge. I want them to continue beyond that point and help students use that knowledge. We do not want our students thinking that economics and the concepts in citizenship or civic education are just an empty academic exercise. We're talking about real life. And so to the extent that you can emphasize that when you teach about these subjects, then I think you're doing the right thing.
Thank you, Dr. Miller. There's a question from Guatemala about the PACE model. Yes, there is the PACE model in Spanish, and the lessons that Dr. Steve Miller recommended are in Spanish, so we can upload these lessons to the virtual community of ITEN. So I would like that you get in contact with ITEN. I'm here with Monica de la Garza, so I think we can, Monica, make these lessons available in English and as well in Spanish. I would like to emphasize something, Dr. Miller, that I think is also important when making a lesson, and I remember that you teach us about this. That it's very important, the closing of every lesson, because sometimes when we teach economic education regarding civics, we are very concerned about the development of the lesson, the activities that we prepare, the introduction of the lesson. But I would like to know, and I would like to have your thoughts about which is the best way of developing a lesson, and how important is to make a good closure of a lesson just to connect the different concepts that you are teaching about.
Well, those are big questions, and they're not unrelated, of course. I want to deal with the lesson planning first. My favorite way to plan a lesson is to work backwards. I am an advocate of backwards planning, and that's not only in lessons but also when I'm doing what we call a unit of instruction. I try to picture what it is that I want the students to be able to do when I'm finished with this lesson. And once I have decided what it is that I want students to be able to do, then I start working backwards from that to try to see a way in which I can structure lessons so that the students go from wherever it is that they started to where I want them to be at the end. So I'm an advocate of backwards planning. I think it works very, very well, especially once you get used to it. All good lessons try to include something on closure. Closure is often where the students consolidate that which they have learned. One of my favorite kinds of lessons is a simulation. And many of you who are in the Training of Trainers program or have used those materials know about the simulation that we used that was called the Big Apple game. And that's a trading game, and students learn about supply and demand and doing it and so on and so forth. But we always had some closure activities at the end of the Big Apple activity, because that's where the students really consolidate the knowledge that they gained from participating in the activity. It's also how the teacher found out whether the simulation taught what it was that the teacher thought it should teach. Because remember, students construct knowledge. And what they're constructing is not necessarily what you think you've been teaching. And so good closure is both a way for you to ensure that the knowledge that they're constructing is closer to what it is that you had in mind, and also to check to see for sure what it is that you think the students have learned. So I recommend backwards planning, and I think closure is an extremely important element.
Thank you, Dr. Miller. And the last question, because I read a comment that from one of the participants that says, I'm going to share this with the economic education teachers, but I would like to know, is this knowledge only for economic education teachers, or we should recommend this knowledge for other teachers, math teachers, social sciences teachers? Why is it so important that we start integrating economic education in our curriculum topics?
Well, I certainly agree that there are many opportunities and places across the curriculum and at different age levels to teach these concepts. And while they come from economics, the economics curriculum is not the only place where one can teach or where one should teach about these things. So I agree completely that we should be working these concepts into other courses and into other subjects. I mean, just to take history and geography as two examples. If you were teaching history of Latin America or some Latin American country, the opportunities to teach students about the choices that were made by historical figures. Why did they make that choice? What were they thinking? Why was their decision to do this different from the decision that some other historical figure might have done? Or this nation used its resources at this moment in time in this particular way, but what did it give up in order to do that? So there's lots of ways in which we can integrate these kinds of economic concepts into other subjects. And I completely agree that, yes, this is not just for teachers of economics or teachers of civics. This notion of these basic economic concepts and the PACE decision-making model, I think, are relevant for many, many teachers and lots of different subjects.
Thank you very much, Dr. Miller, once again for your disposition to answer these questions. And I am sure that many more questions that will come along in our ITEN group, in the Building Democratic Classroom group that is in the Inter-American Teacher Education Network platform. I would like also to invite you to visit the Inter-American Program on Education for Democratic Values and Practices website, which is www.educadem.org. I will write it right now in the chat for your reference. You can find there in the section of information resources our online bulletins, and one of the online bulletins is focused on economic education. So this is a topic that our program would like to continue emphasizing, and would like to continue collaborating with the Inter-American Teacher Education Network. And we hope that this is the first presentation of Dr. Miller, and more presentations from him and from other experts will come to nurture and enhance this topic, as well as to increase its visibility. Because when we learn history, when we learn geography, when we learn civics, it's not common to have this type of knowledge integrated. Economic education is also the economic way of thinking. And incorporating the economic way of thinking is really very useful and practical for better equipped and informed students for making greater and effective and legitimate decision making. So I would like to invite every one of you, those who have experience in the topic, those who have not experience in the topic, to continue searching resources about this, continue being informed. It's really an interesting topic, and you can be in love with it in a moment, like many of the people that who are working in it as we are. So I would like to thank Dr. Miller once again. Also, the participants, I know there are people from the Ministry of Education of Peru, so thank you very much for attending this topic, the specialist Marco Antonio Rodriguez Guaman in citizenship education. There was also a participant, Dr. Hamad, that I know he's from Jordania, so thank you, Dr. Hamad, for being there. And I also know him because he was a colleague from a Training of Trainers program developed by the Council for Economic Education, one of the institutions that Dr. Miller mentioned that develop a lot of materials on this topic. So I would like to thank all the participants, and I will leave the room for Monica de la Garza, who is going to explain you where you can find all the resources, the presentation, and the webinar that Dr. Miller developed. Thank you very much, and Monica de la Garza will be with you. So I'm going to go ahead right now. I'm going to stop sharing my webcam right now because I'm going to go through my screen and show you how to find the Inter-American program on Education for Democratic Values and Practices website and group. Just a second, we're going to go ahead. So I'm going to open another tab right here, and we're going to go through, I'm going to go through the long way because that's the one that I know, which is through the Organization of American States website, and then we go to education, and then we select Inter-American Program on Education in Democratic Values and Practices. Right here you can see the website of this program for you to get to know it better and go ahead and check it out. I'm going to also go ahead and open another tab for the Inter-American Teacher Education Network, which is different from the Spanish platform. Right here, as you see, we are in the home page. We broadcast a little image for you about this event. We're going to do this every time we have a webinar so that you can feel sure about which is the direct link to get through the webinar and everything. And as you can see, we have here, actually it comes as the third group, which is one of our most recent and seen groups. It's right here, Building Democratic Classrooms. I'm going to go ahead and select it. It might probably ask me to enter my personal username and password. If you don't have a username and password still, you're going to need to go ahead and click here to join and create a different one for the English community. So right now, I'm just going through. And now that we are in, I'm able to go down through this group. Right here you can see it, Building Democratic Classrooms. That's the name of the group. And in your right-hand corner, you see a box which says Resources. Right here you can find the resources for this webinar. Webinar Strengthening Students' Decision-Making with Economics and Civics. If you click there, then you're right there. You're going to see all the content information right here. You can already find the synopsis of this webinar. And you will follow to this webinar. You will find the PowerPoint, the conclusion, and the video. So this is the group. Of course, there's space for us to interact by entering some comments, new questions, share good practices. Everything you would like will be very welcome, and we'll be glad to have you participating. Thank you very much. I would also like to share with you the Twitter of this program and the Facebook, because there's a Facebook and Twitter first. And you're going to receive an email after this, after we close this session, where you're going to get the links to all this information that I'm telling you now. But I'm going to go ahead right now and write also in our the Twitter right here. So it's Twitter. slash some, I'm not sure, I'm not very familiar with Twitter, but I think it's like this. So twitter.com and then slash, I don't know if I'm missing something. I think it's good to go. So this is the Twitter of the program. This program is of course our major collaboration in this for this event, because we're doing this this webinar together, the ITEN community and this program. Okay, there you go. You can see all the news. They post news every day, and it's everything related to this. I'm sure you're going to find some news related to this webinar right now. So I'm glad that you're here. Thank you all again. I'm going to go back to our platform where I was. I'm going to stop quick sharing. There we go. That was it. Thank you again, Dr. Mueller, for being present with us. I'm sure you became an expert with technology. I'm sure, well, we were glad to hear you. It was a really honor to have you, and I hope that everyone have a great Thursday afternoon and lunch. Okay, I'm going to close now the session. If anyone have questions, please go ahead and enter the Building Democratic Classrooms group so that you can continue asking, or just go ahead and enter, please, the ITEN community, where we're going to have some technical assistance going on there. Thank you again, and bye-bye. Have a great day.